Hello, everyone. Good morning. How are we? How are you doing?
Good, good, good.
Good.
Good
Good.
morning.
Nice.
Good.
So, how did you find the new book so far?
It's really good. It's really good. It's really good.
Interesting.
I was
I
excited.
think it's a very different mindset compared to the one we read before about the mob programming. Of course, the mob programming was nice, but I did notice that a number of you got bored very early because it was a little bit repetitive. But this book is a little bit different in the sense that maybe you have noticed it is you can actually read at any point in the book and it will still make sense because unlike other books that there's a story and you have to have a progression, you have to read page by page, otherwise you get lost. This one, each chapter is totally independent from the other one. And as you can see, actually, every chapter is created or written by a different author, uh, and they all come with different ideas. You will notice, especially towards the end, that some authors do overlap in certain stuff, but until we get there, you will not notice. So today we had to read a number of them. Who would like to begin with the chapter that they found the most interesting?
The functional programming one was really interesting.
Okay, what did you find interesting about it?
The thing is, I've been like watching somehow on YouTube, on my YouTube thing is starting to show up like functional programming. So
Mhm,
I'm starting like not to learn it, but to kind of delve into what it is. And I
mhm,
found
mhm.
it quite interesting that is a nice it's an interesting paradigm. Is I think it will be really hard to learn and to apply. But as the chapter said, you don't need to learn it as to learn it and program in that way, but you can use parts of it and implement it into OOP as well. So it's really, really interesting.
Yeah,
And it's basically
Kotlin.
what you've been saying us in the class, like one function do one thing and one thing only, and everything tidy, everything needy. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, Kotlin supports functional programming, which is good because you can work a little bit with in both aspects, and we use a little bit of that in Android when you have a click listener, for example. We inject a function so that the functionality is actually executed somewhere else or comes from somewhere else. So yes, exactly. Very good. Okay. Um, what else? What about? I would like to begin by act with prudence, technical depth. Every single one of you, um, yes, every single one of you, because all of you have already started either Android or the data, and you know that just we have all been in that position where we say, this is a problem, but I'd rather fix it later. I will come back later, and little by little you start accumulating and accumulating and accumulating until you eventually reach a point where you have a monster that not even you understand, not even you know what that monster is doing. So that is one way of calling technical debt. You have been accumulating debt and debt because you say, I need to get ready. Humberto is bothering me. I need to get this assignment done. And you start accumulating what they call technical debt. And then, and then you want to add new features, you want to do improvements, and you don't even know where to start because the thing is so chaotic that again you don't understand the code. And I really like the analogy they made of technical debt with financial debt, in the sense that I want to go on vacation but I don't have the money. Okay, let me get a little bit of a loan. I go to vacation, I enjoy, but when I get back home I still have to pay that stuff with interest. And the same happens in programming. Of course, you don't actually put money necessarily, but you do have to pay that in time, in hours, in effort. So, I mean, my strategy is that, of course, I try my best to, when I'm writing the code, to not accumulate any technical debt because I don't like owing anything. But if for some reason I say, look, I really need to get this done and I need to move on, before I begin a new feature or before I as soon as I have a gap, and I always force myself to have that time. I say, look, I'm not going to allow more accumulation of debt. It's time to pay this off, or I'm not going to continue. So in my schedule, I schedule for paying debt because I do not like to accumulate debt, and financial nor technical. So it is important. Any thoughts about that? Any thoughts? Have you found yourself accumulating technical debt?
Oh yes, all the time, all the
Yeah.
time. But
What about the?
in my case is when I'm coding and then I'm testing because I test code, test, and then I see like not a bug but a behavioral thing that I don't want, but I'm working
Mm,
in a whole other thing. I just write it up on a notepad. I fix that later. Keep working. I'm working, and then after I finish that feature, that part of the code that I'm working on, then I go back and
fix
then.
it.
But yes, it's like you always have to like go back and forward with code.
Mm. What about the rest? Dima, Khaled, in your internships, how is that going? I know you both are on time pressure because
Yeah.
of the school, the supervisor. How are you balancing the creation of code or features while not accumulating technical debt? Anyone?
Yeah, we keep track for our task. We keep the most important task to be in the top. If we have facing a problem with it, we can keep it for go to the next step, for example, and go back to it. But we
Mm,
keep in track for it. We keep
mm,
notes so we can go back and figure what's wrong with it.
exactly. And Khaled, in your case?
Actually, I think technical debt is something you can't skip because most of the time, the manager, the one responsible of the project, he needs to see some progress,
Mm,
and in some cases, he doesn't understand that you are focusing on one task. You need to finish it on a proper way to use it later. So you need to leave something and then start with a new task and then come back to the old task again just to in order to show some progress on the project. But for me, I pay the technical debt all the time. I
mm.
come back and solve the problem.
Yeah, I would say that from my experience, it is beneficial when the supervisor has a background in programming, because if they don't, they assume that creating all this code is like magic. Oh, it's easy. And if you tell them, look, I need to spend 1 week. If you tell someone that doesn't code, I need to spend 1 week cleaning technical debt, they will see you like you're not going to waste 1 week not producing anything. But if the person has a background in programming, they understand the importance of it, because uh, by paying that, you are allowing that future features are going to be quicker and easier to implement. You see, so I do think it is
That's
important.
exactly what happened to us actually in our training.
Yeah, so it is important to always keep that in mind. Like, again, I aim the best to avoid writing code that I know have to be changed. But as Khaled mentioned, every now and then I just have to do it, especially if I'm in a really, really tight. But then I make sure to come back to it, and I force myself to pay it back as soon as possible. So yeah, it's something to always keep in mind. Good. I want to speak about ask what will the user do? This is one of my favorite things. This is one of my favorite things because we all think that we know how the user is going to use our code, or sorry, our system. And that is not true. Um, to me, it is very frustrating when I am sitting in conversations and at the end it's bunch of speculation. No, we should do it like this because this is better. No, the user, based on what? Based on what is this better? Based on your opinion? No. I believe that whenever you're creating a new feature, a new whatever, the best approach is just create something. We know it's not perfect, but just create something and launch it. Let the user use the thing. And here's the key part. analyze the reaction. And based on that, based on real data, you're going to be able to say, look, this doesn't work, not because I say it, because 9 out of 10 users didn't even know how to use it. You see? And to be honest, I do that all the time with all of you. What do I mean? The homework projects, the plugin, all of this stuff is software. And I already had certain assumptions about how I thought the users, meaning you guys, were going to use my software. In many cases, I was right. Okay, things are working exactly the way I want. And in many cases, I was horribly wrong. You have no idea how many changes I have had to do because I think, okay, this is going to be fantastic for the students. I launch it and it's the total opposite. Students are worse off than without it. So I have to adapt because I think I know what the students are going to do, but it turns out it's not like that. You have to have this mindset of saying, look, I need to write something. I'm going to create a code. I'm going to do the feature. I'm going to launch it as soon as possible. But then I'm going to keep track of how the user is reacting with this. And based on that data, I am going to make the necessary adjustments. Staying in meetings, hours discussing what's the best thing to do. Look, most of the time, it's just bunch of blah, blah, blah. Bunch of blah, 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 bunch of assumptions. Because then you launch the thing and the user use it in a totally different manner. Of course, especially when we speak about Android, that there's like a UI, there's already guidelines of what are the certain things that you should do, certain things that you should avoid. Of course, follow those guidelines. But it's not until the user sits down to use your product that you will really, really, really make sure that the assumptions that you made were either correct or incorrect. I mean, in previous jobs, they would say we have to create all this stuff, and I'm like, but based on what? What are we using to determine that this is what the user actually needs? Have we even talked to them? Like, have they even tried the simplest approach? If the answer is yes, okay, let's go for it. But if the answer is no, why spend so much time building a feature that probably would not even be needed? You see, you have to have that mindset and listening to your customers. Any thoughts on that? Any thoughts? Especially, let's say Khaled. I want to call Khaled specifically because you're doing Android, and in Android, you're creating an app that people are going to use. Has that been part of the discussions with your supervisor regarding the app that you're building?
Actually, the one we create is, you can say there is something similar in the market. So the expectations actually is not fully known, but a person can expect what the expectation will be, what the user think about it. Yes, there is some new features. I myself not sure 100% how it will be. So yes, this will be very helpful if before build it or before working it and take long time. Know what the user think about it. Is it easy to be used, or it's very hard and complicated, then the user will not use it at all. There is some part of the code, and there is some part. So I don't know what's the ways can be followed to know the users.
So a very simple approach that companies do is they call customers, existing customers, and they say, look, we're going to launch a new feature and we want your opinion. And before programming, because nowadays there's a bunch of that. Zeppelin, for example, is one of those. Sketch is one of those. You can create prototypes based on designs, not based on code. You don't have to write any code.
Okay.
And you give the prototype to the person, and the person, you put them to do tasks. I want you to please create a user, and you don't say anything else. Please create a user. Here's the app. Click around, and you observe. And more importantly, you shut up. Because if you start telling the user what to do, you're influencing the whole thing, and that is not good. So you observe, and trust me, it is so painful. In fact, whenever those sessions happens, developers should never be there because it is so painful from the perspective of the developer. In what sense? One, for you, you created the stuff. It is so obvious, but of course it's not obvious to the user. So you are there biting your tongue because you say you want to say the answer because to you it's so obvious, but you realize it's not as obvious as you think. It's painful from that perspective. And it's also painful because when you create products, of course you are proud of what you created. Of course you're happy with all the effort. And then when you see other people stripping it apart and realizing that all your effort, it can be a little bit painful. So yeah, special people need to be in those scenarios, listening to the feedback and all that stuff. And sometimes the creator of the thing, unless they are very, very trained, can be a little bit problematic because they are emotionally attached to the whole thing. So yeah, I mean, they can be in a separate room or remotely in a separate place. But anyways, yeah, it's important to watch the users. Again, I do it all the time with all of you. I create stuff, I launch it, let me see how people react. Sometimes it goes good, sometimes it goes bad. I make adjustments. In the beginning, I have to make assumptions, but I always come with the mindset that most likely my assumptions are either completely wrong or at best case scenario, partially wrong. Yeah, so it depends. Dima, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so I think the beauty of simplicity is coming here. So to put the interface to be simple, the steps to be symbols, and your code, it must be symbols. And most of time we must put ourselves in the shoes of the customers. So yeah, imagine ourselves that we are the customers. We don't have any background in the computer or in the coding. So most of the time we must thinking about this.
Exactly. That's why, I mean, creating software that has a user interface, that could be a website, an Android app, anything that has a user interface. It's more than just writing code because, yeah, you write the code, maybe it's bug free, but it can be super hard to use, super hard to navigate, super hard to move. So that is why it is important. And I made, especially in the past, I used to make that mistake so often that I would create bunch of features without even asking the users if they were interested, mostly for personal related projects, bunch of features, and half of them were not even used. You see? So it is very important. Remember, always talk to your customers. And when you go out to to your companies, usually, not mostly, it is not the developer's responsibility to speak to the customers. Usually it's either, let's say, customer support, since they are the ones that are closest to the customers. The designers tend to do that. But even though it might not be you, specifically you, the one who's going to be speaking to the customers, make sure that at the very least you question things. Where is this coming from? What motivates this feature? Is this the only way we can achieve this? You have to question. You have to question because otherwise, just writing code. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're there for writing code, but you're there for much more to hopefully improve the overall product and make sure that a goal is achieved, right? So it is very important that you get used to asking questions. And when you see, hey, we need to implement this stuff. Yeah, but why do we need to implement this? Where is this? What's the motivation behind this? What's the problem that we're trying to solve? Keep that in mind. When it's for students, I say, what problem am I solving for the students? Is this making their life easier? Or is this just, what is the purpose of this? And if there's no purpose, then why am I even doing this? You see? Things to keep in mind. Good. Automate your coding standards. Actually, you are doing this, but maybe you didn't know. Actually, in the Android, because in the Python, they don't have that. Python works a little bit differently over there. But detect. All of you have detect. And you see in the videos how I run detect. That is a tool that allows you to, well, format your code without you having to do it manually. Isn't it beautiful? And is it beautiful that you just run a command or click a button and the whole thing automatically, yeah? There's two beauties about that. One, the obvious one. you don't have to do it. I mean, isn't it? Yeah, you don't have to do it. But there's a second one. It standardizes everything. It makes sure that everyone, regardless of who wrote the code follows the same standard. So it is important, whichever product you work with, that you implement one of those things. Detect is one. Each programming language has their own. In Python, for example, the tool is called Black. That's how the tool is called, to format your code. Always, I mean, nowadays, every time I create a new product, guess what's the first thing that I configure? Detect. I always configure Detect to make sure that it's there, I can run it, and I have configured this is something that is not part of the course, but I have configured the continuous integration system so that as soon as I push code, just as the auto grading is automatically triggered, in my case, I push code and it's called the build system, is triggered to check if my thing is correct, because I can forget. And if, just as your task fail, if there's something wrong, the stuff fails if I forget to format my code. So it is important when you go to your internships to make sure that you understand that whole system, the build system. What are the things that are graded? Is it formatting? Is it unit testing? What are the things that are graded that you understand? And also for your own projects that you configure those things so that you can get into that habit and automation. Any questions about that? Like any thoughts on that more than questions? Any thoughts about coding standards?
I mean,
you know,
as
go
they
ahead.
say, is mostly company to company will have different standards. So you just have to stick to one and be depending on the project. If you have that one, you just stick to it. But there's, as with the simplicity, there's many views on that. Some people say, oh no, 3 spaces for indentation. Some people say no, 4. Some people, so the important part of it is that we as they say on the book, we choose one, we stick to it, and we automate it with the Detect and stuff. But each company will be different, I guess.
It depends a bit of the company, but more on the programming language. So Kotlin is Kotlin, and it doesn't matter the company you are. The standard for Kotlin, that doesn't change. So, for example, Detect, it's Detect, yeah? Now, certain companies might have certain things. So let me give you an example. There are certain rules in Detect that you can modify or even eliminate. And for your projects, I think I did eliminate a couple of rules that personally I don't see them as a problem. So of course you adapt the rules to the team, and then you stick to it. Of course, Khaled, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I want to share this experience. When we started the project, since we started from scratch, there is no Detect. So I tried to Detect format, nothing. Okay, then we were live and heaven, and we didn't know that. Then I have to go and search how to configure this Detect and added these files, and it's really a headache, and still not working perfectly, maybe 70% or 60%. But it's in my agenda to ask about you how to create the task on the Detect, how to create special task, how to format it, and then you can use it because every time it's coming back successful to me. Okay, then there is something wrong. It's not fixing anything.
so wait. It never fails. It never fails.
It's at the beginning, yeah, it's never failed. So there is no task to be done. It's just the configuration.
Okay.
Well, the file, I opened the old file in your project, and I found there is a list of things need to be written about the spaces, the comma, this stuff, but I don't know how to do it yet. So
yeah, of course I can assist. I will say Detect is one of those things that once you create a project, you only do it once. You don't configure Detect for the same project many times. At most, you update the versions. So that is one of those things that whenever I start a new project, guess what I do?
Straight to
it. I go to an old project and I need to copy and paste stuff because I always forget. I mean, the configuration of Detect is not something that is in the top of my head. So for example, I recently started a new project and I opened actually the homework project of Android because in there it's already configured. So I just copy the stuff that I needed. I adapted certain stuff, and that's it. So my recommendation, Khaled, will be the first step: try to open the either homework, because actually both of no, that version doesn't have it. The Android has it. So open Android and then you copy the stuff. Try it.
I opened and I see, but I thought this is related to Umberto, so I don't have to copy it. I can't copy it, so
no, it's DTEC. I mean, I did make some changes to make your students' life easy. You say that DTEC format, actually, if you try to look that up, that doesn't really exist. I created that stuff. I created a special task that behind the scenes runs DTEC. But technicalities to make your life easier. But we can, of course, in a help session, I can help you. We can look into it. But again, that's one of those things that you do once. The same for Python with Black, and there's a bunch of it's also called on import, that it deletes all imports that are not used. So I sort the import order. All of those things, you do it once. But I have to admit, it's way easier in Python than it is in with Kotlin. But yes. All right, let's go with the last one. Beauty is in simplicity. Dima mentioned a little bit about that, the importance of writing beautiful code. And of course, the word beautiful is subjective. It's very subjective. But there are certain aspects that we can all agree that makes your code beautiful. As for example, reducing complexity, as I tell you, reducing complexity. A lot of students, especially early, which I like when they do it because it gives us the opportunity to have that conversation, but they solve a problem using, for example, nested for loops. And yes, it works. But then I ask them, do you think that we really need nested for loops in here? I mean, it works, but it's significantly more complex than what it needs to be. So how about if we refactor? And we refactor, and then we reduce from 2 for loops, one nested inside the other, to only one, and then making your code less complex, for example. Naming. This is why it's so important: good variable naming, function naming, and class naming. Because if your code, if you do not express in the names what's happening, either what the function is supposed to do or what this variable represents, it's going to be very difficult to follow your code. And I'm pretty sure that every single one of you, because you're in Android internship, both of you know the importance of writing good variables, and it's not easy. Whoever tells you that writing good names is easy, it's either doesn't know what they're doing or I don't know, but it's not easy, because you write your code, you come back a week, and then you realize, what is this thing? I thought this was clear a week ago, but now I don't understand half of it. So it is a challenge. And I always, I mean, it's funny because I write a piece of code, I'm super happy, I move on, I come back to it, and then I realize, this is not good. I don't like it. And then I change it again. I go back, and it's a process. Software is a living organism. It's always evolving. The day you stop refactoring your code, it means one of two things: either that no one is using that software anymore, and therefore it doesn't need any more maintenance, or actually, I think that's the only thing it means, because you always have to be updating your software. Otherwise, at the very least, you need to be updating the versions of the stuff. So every now and then I have to go into projects, assuming that I do care about the project, and update stuff, because otherwise it means that no one is using it. Yeah, so always keep that in mind. Any thoughts about this? Beauty is in the simplicity. How for the people in the internship, how is that going? Naming variables, especially now you're working with other people. You have to probably read other people's code. Are you aligned in that sense, or have you noticed that you see people writing code that you don't fully agree? Khaled, Dima, how is that going?
Yeah, we see a lot about this. So our team is good actually. So we are, yeah, we are agreed about the name of variable, and to be the code to be written in the readable manner. So even we can we have put a comments each one of the function that this function what is exactly doing, and we document everything's.
Well, yeah, for your internship, it's really important to document.
Yeah, because we're working in the big projects, not simple task.
Yeah, their project is a little bit different compared to the rest. But Khaled, go ahead.
Yes, I spent 1 day, 2 days just reading code for other team. So it's taking time, and if the code is simple, then it will be easier, taking less time. And also reading code from open source. Usually it's complex because there is some features that I don't know or I need to know, so I need to learn about it. So it will be more complex when a person don't know what this feature do.
Yes, exactly. And also you don't have the background of the app. Like, what is this app supposed to do? But yeah, I agree. Enrique, you had your hand raised.
Question for the people: Do people write variable names in Swedish in Sweden? Because I have a friend that studying programming as well, and every time I read his code, it's like
in Swedish.
He's writing variables in Swedish, and I'm like, why are you doing this? Why you do this to me? And he says, because if I write it in Swedish, then they know that I didn't use ChatGPT, and I'm like, but it looks ugly. But I'm like, it looks ugly.
Actually, that's a very silly argument, and I'm going to tell you why. Because I can ask ChatGPT to write it to me in English, and then I can just do refactor and change the variable names automatically to Swedish. So that is not a good argument.
Super weird. It's super weird to read Swedish variable names. It's like,
to be honest,
weird.
I have never written or first, I have never written code in Spanish, and I have never read code in Spanish. Actually, that sounds weird.
Yeah, I did wrote code in Spanish when I was a kid, when I was learning C++ for school and stuff. But then the variable names was like, Spanish, but in Swedish they looked weird. And now that if I think about it, in Spanish they will look weird as well.
They will look weird in any language except English, in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's super funny.
But yeah, that's another. I mean, when you're in a company, most likely they are gonna ask you to do it in English, especially if it's an international company.
Guess if they write it in Arabic.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine if they start writing. Probably, I know Khaled will be able to write it.
Yeah.
So, actually,
Kotlin in Arabic from right to left, that will be fun.
Khaled, the first Android app, the login, he created an Arabic version, and so he created the Arabic translations to it. So it was quite nice. Yeah. Good. But yeah, really nice. I mean, hopefully, I would say the two takeaways. One, remember, listen to your customers, ask questions, observe, make assumptions, but test those assumptions. And number two, the importance of writing code in focus towards readability, maintainability, and of course, it's a process. It's not like you reach the point and you're done. No, it's always going to be evolved. Especially the more you work on the project, the more you learn about the project and the domain, you're going to be evolving. So thank you everyone for today. Hopefully you liked this method of the book. There's new topics, and I will then see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice.
Bye-bye.
Have a good one, everyone.
Bye.
Have a good
Bye-bye.
one. Bye-bye.